Welcome to Everest Matters, a talk with Kuntal Joisher. Everest Matters is a talk in the series of conversations which Just Be Resto Cafe and Wellness is hosting as a part of its third anniversary celebration. Just Be Resto Cafe is India's first oil-free, whole food plant-based restaurant based in Sadashiv Nagar, Bangalore. We completed our third year on June 3rd, 2020. We are known to serve healthy vegan food without any oil, any additives, added sugar. We also have a wellness clinic where we conduct health talks, cooking classes, and guide people to good health through health consultations. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Kuntal Joisher. Kuntal Joisher is a mountain climber and longtime vegan who successfully reached the peak of Mount Everest on May 19, 2016. A couple of things that he has said, I would like to quote. He says, as a vegan, I have never told anyone of them to become a vegan. Instead, my idea is to do spectacular things and inspire them to ask me a question. What do you eat that you can pull off such feats? Well, climbing Mount Everest was a spectacular feat, and I'm sure he got a lot of questions after that. He also says, I'm not a motivational or inspirational speaker. When I walk into the room, I go with one goal, for people to find their own personal Everest, whatever that may be. Well, after this talk, I'm sure a lot of people will be motivated by what Kuntal has to say to find their own personal Everest. So I'll hand it over to Kuntal now.
Awesome. So I'm going to start off with something, Hemendra, that you sort of touched upon, which is me saying that instead of asking people to go vegan, my idea is sort of to go and do such crazy and spectacular things that people ask me the question, boss, tum ye kaise karte ho? Tum kya khate ho? Pehle main wo batao. And I will tell you a bit of background about how that thought process started. Now, I went vegan in 2002, mostly for animal rights reasons, wherein I connected the dot that a piece of beef is equal to a glass of milk, is equal to a block of cheese, is equal to a leather belt that I was wearing. And when I realized that as a vegetarian, I was continuing to contribute to a lot of animal cruelty, a lot of animal abuse, and a lot of animal slaughter, there was a lot of I was constantly in that dilemma, or more than dilemma, I was not able to reconcile between the fact that I thought that I was a compassionate person, but that my actions were not compassionate. So there was this disconnect between my thoughts and my actions, and I had to reconcile that fact. And there were two ways forward. Either I could have done something about it, or I could have said ignorance is bliss and moved on with my life. And that is generally the path that I had taken till that point in my life, because it's an easier path. Apathy is always easy to do. And at that point, I thought, no, I actually want to take a stand for animals, which is where I decided that the bare minimum I can do from my research that I found out was that I can make a choice that's going to impact what's on my plate, what things I wear, and what things I use on a daily basis. At least that's the bare minimum that I can do, which is control my own actions. And so I went vegan from that point. This is late 2002. Now, for any viewers and vegans who are tuning in, when I went vegan, my initial thought was, man, this thing changed my entire life. Maybe I should also change the entire world and make them vegan. And that's how I sort of started off my journey. And for the first 2-3 years, I was this crazy activist. Every dinner table conversation, every conversation at work, every conversation that I had with my friends was only centered around veganism. To give you an example, I would go into a product meeting where they would take into where it would be like a non-vegan restaurant, and I would not order anything. So then my table is empty and everyone is eating everything. So they're like, Kuntal, why are you not eating anything? So that would make me the center of focus, which would make veganism the center of focus. And then I would constantly talk about veganism. Quickly, I realized over a period of lot of years that I did not convert a single person into turning vegan, or a single person into even giving up maybe meat once a week. And that's when I realized, man, I'm not having the desired effect that I really want to have. On the contrary, I am stressed. I am becoming negative. I am becoming negative about the world in general. And this is not the way I want to do things. Let's just get off this kind of activism. I have no interest in this kind of activism. Instead, let's just be a vegan and do whatever I can as an individual and move on with my life. And then at some point, luckily, mountaineering came into my life. I went on and started doing some amazing climbs. And I started realizing during that journey is that people started coming to me and asking, hey, what do you eat? And at that point, when I went and I told them that you should be eating vegan food, or you should be eating more vegetables, you should be eating more food, you should be eating cleaner, you should be leading a better lifestyle, they suddenly started listening to me. So here I am all these years trying to tell them exactly the same thing, and they would never listen to me. And then when I stopped telling them those things and started doing certain things, and they came and asked me the question and I gave them the same answer, it was far more acceptable to them. So that's when it sort of hit me that this is the journey I am going to go on. Look, no disrespect to any activists or anyone else who's going and doing crazy things in the vegan world. More power to everyone. If we can even save one sentient life, that's what matters to me at the end of the day. But to me, this is my journey. I'm not going to tell anyone to go vegan, but just keep doing such stuff in the mountain or in my personal life and keep talking about it, so that when people come and ask me the question, they are more receptive to what my answers are. So that's sort of been my journey. And I'm going to tell a sort of a story in this instance. I remember that in 2010, there was another mountaineer, a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, who also started his journey of mountaineering. And he spoke to his expedition leader and he said that I want to climb Everest. And he was a Brahmin vegetarian. So he was like a really staunch vegetarian. And his expedition leader told him that you have to start eating all kinds of meat. You should even be eating beef, and you should even be eating whatever it walks. That's literally what his expedition leader told him. And he decided that eating animals was more important, and his dream was more important than animal cruelty or animal abuse. And he went on that journey. Of course, he climbed Everest. But I personally feel that if he had already had an instance where someone had already done a mountain climb without eating animals, then there was a chance that possibly he would have also said that I'm going to do it as a vegetarian or vegan. Like, I remember typing in Google in 2010 that climbing Mount Everest as a vegan. Has it ever happened to anyone in their entire life that you have typed something in Google and Google says 0 results? Or Google gives results, but they are like terrible results? Never happens. Google always has an answer to most of our questions. And I didn't get an answer to my question. So even I had sort of my self-doubts. But one thing that I was very clear about is that I'm going to climb Everest as a vegan, or I'm not going to climb it at all. I'm going to achieve my peak performance on a vegan diet, on a vegan lifestyle. And that's how my journey is going to sort of go forward. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey now. My background is that I'm a Gujarati from the Gujarati community. And for anyone who knows a little bit about Gujarati community, they know that they are not into fitness at all. And if, like, I remember myself, if I had, like, I live on the second floor in my building, and I don't remember in my teenage life or in my in my 20s ever climbing to the second floor. I always remember taking a lift and going to the second floor. That's the kind of lazy guy I was, and that's the kind of fitness I had. I was 110 kilos, and mountaineering was not in my plans at all. Forget mountaineering, not even like going to a mountain region also not in my plans. So there were things that happened in my life. I got married, and then Dipti, my wife, and I decided that we wanted to take a vacation in the mountains because we wanted to see some snow. Not that we loved mountains, but we just wanted to touch snow. So we went on that trip, and on that trip, I fell in love with the mountains. Eventually, a year and a half later, I prepared and I decided that I wanted to see the tallest mountain of the world, Everest. And anyone who's in the mountain world will at some point have that sort of urge in them to see Everest. So that's the urge even I had. So I went and I signed up for an Everest base camp trip. Now I flew to Kathmandu, and from there we flew to this village called Lukla. Lukla is also known as one of the most dangerous airports in the world. So we land into Lukla. Luckily I survived that flight. That flight is always like a challenge. And from there we walked for about 10 days through some of the most spectacular scenery that I had ever seen in my entire life. Some gigantic Himalayan mountains that I totally fell in love with. And we reached Everest Base Camp, which was like a dream come true for me. One of the biggest ironies of Everest Base Camp is that you can't see Everest from Everest Base Camp. And that was like a really downer for me. So luckily our expedition leader had sort of set up this. We were camped, we had this small detour where we were camped at this campsite called Pumori Base Camp. And now Pumori is also known as the daughter of Everest. So it is this mountain right opposite Everest. And this is the mountain on the screen. And it also offers some of the best views of Mount Everest. So that evening, we were camped at Pumori Base Camp, and we were in the dining tent. We were chit-chatting. We were enjoying our food, and life was generally very good. And then this Sherpa outside sort of started shouting my name, and in the mountains, it's almost always never good. So I quickly ran out, and this Sherpa is like, "Sir, aap Everest ko dekho." And so I turned around and I saw Everest. The last rays of sunset were falling on Everest. Every other mountain was in the color of grey and blue. But Everest was this burning golden in color. And in that moment, like one of the first feelings in my mind was, man, this is absolutely insane. Like I literally fell in first love when I saw Everest. वो हिंदी पिक्चर का डायलॉग है ना, पहली नजर में प्यार हो गया. And to me, मेरे साथ exactly वो हुआ. And believe me, standing there, it almost felt as if reaching the top of Everest was no different than reaching the top of Moon. And both of them seemed like an impossible task at that point in my life. But I promised myself that I'll come back one day and that I'll reach on top of Everest at one day. It's not as if I was ready to do it tomorrow or the day after, because that's simply not how it works. So that's where sort of my journey started. And I had announced to my expedition team that I was going to climb Everest as a vegan. So there was a lot of pushback because most of the literature around climbing Everest was centered around, hey, you have to eat meat, you have to eat dairy, you have to eat cheese. Otherwise, how are you going to generate warmth in your body? Otherwise, how are you going to build that muscle? Otherwise, how are you going to build that stamina? Typically, meat and cheese and high protein and high fat items are directly related to generating warmth and generating muscle and those kind of things, and especially animal fat and especially animal protein. And that's still the current thinking in the mountaineering world, even in 2020. 10 years after so many vegans are in the mountaineering field, people still think that you need to do all of those things. But for me, as I said, that I went vegan way before mountaineering came into my life. And as years progressed, veganism became a part of my life, an integral part of my life, where it is my value system, it is my ethics. So I was not going to compromise my ethics for my dream. I was very clear about that. So I said I'm going to climb Everest as a vegan or not climb it at all. That was very clear in my mind. Of course, there's a whole bunch of these things, like the reason why I went vegan, mostly because as a vegetarian, I constantly kept thinking that I'm not contributing to animal cruelty. But anyone who's a vegetarian and seeing this presentation, please remember that as a vegetarian, you are continuing to contribute to as much animal cruelty as non-vegetarians are. So if you want to take a stand, or if you want to be compassionate towards animals, I think veganism is most definitely the first step that you can take. So one of the things that I remember, that I distinctly remember that my expedition leader told me before I decided to climb Everest, was that to climb to the top of the world, you need a top of the world mind and you need a top of the world body. And so when I decided to climb Everest, I realized that I had to build that top of the world mind and my top of the world body. And so I went on this journey of about 4 years of doing a lot of hikes, doing a lot of training, of climbing a lot of mountains across the world in the Himalaya. To give you a sense, almost 4 to 5 months every year, I was out of home climbing mountains. And after this entire journey of 4 years, I sort of had this sense that I had built fair bit of fitness and fair bit of experience that I was ready to climb Everest. And so in 2014, I showed up at Everest Base Camp to begin that journey of reaching the top of Everest. Now on April 18th, a huge accident happened at Everest where 17 Sherpa guides died in a single instance. At that point, it was the biggest accident that happened on Everest. This was a section called the Khumbu Icefall where an ice avalanche happened. Blocks the size of a big room, blocks the size of a car fell down on the Sherpa guides. They were crushed in an instant. It was a really difficult time for everyone. After weeks of lot of back and forth, we realized that the mountain was unsafe. And at that point, it did not make any sense to climb this mountain and putting any more lives at risk. So we all backed off. We all turned around and we came home. And we decided that we'll go back and climb Everest in 2015. I was ready to wait one inconsequential year. Human life was more important. So I came back in 2015 and this time things went a little better. Now, to give everyone a sense of how Everest is climbed, it's climbed in stages. You just don't show up and reach the top of the world the next day. Everest is at 29,000 feet. And the next time you take a flight and the flight is at cruise altitude and the screen shows 30,000 feet, minus 50 degrees Celsius outside, that's the height I went to physically, not inside a plane. So you can sort of get a sense of what Everest is all about. Your body has to adjust to the various altitudes on the mountain. If you try and go fast, like for example, if I take any one of you and put you on top of Everest right now, you will get a massive heart attack within 5 minutes and you will die. That's how fast you will end up dying if I put you on Everest right now. So you have to gradually climb this mountain, and it takes almost about, the entire expedition takes about 60 days to finish. So in 2015, we had almost spent about close to 20 days on the mountain, and we were at the base camp. We had finished some climbing higher up the mountain, and again, base camp life is really nice. It was a warm day. Warm day is of course very relative when you are at Everest Base Camp. Instead of -5, if it's -3, that's a warm day. It's -2 lesser. So you enjoy that extra warmth that you are getting at the base camp. And we were all enjoying our time. And then I remember we were sitting in the dining tent and all our chairs were shaking. And this is not a normal occurrence. Sure, you are on a glacier and the glacier shakes and croaks at times. But this is completely unlike anything else. And we knew we were in the middle of a big earthquake. And we all ran out and we realized that a 7.9 magnitude earthquake had hit Nepal, the largest to hit the country in an entire century. And we were right in the middle of it. And as much as people think earthquakes don't just go on for 5-10 seconds, this one almost went on for like 75 seconds. And it was as if you were almost standing on top of a giant swing. Anyway, the earthquake sort of passed away and everyone was like a little tentative, nervous, what's coming next. We hear this loud, gigantic boom as if a big bomb blast had happened somewhere. And we knew possibly an avalanche had gotten dislodged somewhere or an avalanche was coming our way. But because there was like a light fog that had set in at the base camp, we could really not see any mountains and we could really not see anything anywhere. So we are standing in middle of a literally like a bomb blast field, but we don't know where the bomb blast is coming from. All we can hear is a sound, and so we are following the sound. We are looking at Everest because we think that's where the avalanche is coming from. And then we suddenly see all these people running towards the avalanche. And I'm like, how is it any smart thing to run towards where the danger is? It doesn't make any sense. That's when we realized actually danger was behind us. We just couldn't see it. The moment I turned around, I was faced with this, like a giant tsunami of snow and ice. Like a gigantic tsunami. Like from left of the sky to the right of the sky, the whole sky was filled with snow and ice. And it was less than 3 seconds away from us. In that moment, I did not think that I was going to die. I was actually very certain that I was going to die. And I escaped a sure shot death that day. And one thing that I learned from that day is that every single moment from that day onwards has been a bonus for me. Because I was dead. It's not like a near-death experience. If any one of you, if you want, you can see the video on YouTube. You can go and type Everest avalanche and you will see the video. When I saw that avalanche, I was 100% dead. So every single day since that day has been a bonus for me. I'm grateful that I'm alive. I'm lucky that I'm alive. And I try as much as possible to live it fully, chase my dreams, and talk about veganism as much as possible, because that's a big passion of mine. So that's something that I've tried doing with utmost dedication since that day. But unfortunately, 21 people were not so lucky at the base camp. 100 got injured badly. 10,000 dead in Nepal. 5 lakh people on the streets living in tents and makeshift shelters. Epidemics and tons of bad things happening across Nepal. This was no longer a mountaineering tragedy like 2014. It was a humanitarian tragedy of unprecedented levels. And we had to sort of cancel our expedition. My entire Sherpa team wanted to go back and be with their family in the time of their need. And it didn't make sense for me to climb that mountain. So as an expedition leader, I canceled the expedition. Most expedition leaders across the base camp canceled the expeditions. We all turned around and we came home. For second year in the running, my expedition was cancelled. When I came home, I was having a little self-doubts. I was like, hoga, nahi hoga. I'm trying for 2 years. It's not happening. Lot of people said, Kuntal, don't go back. You have been alive. You're lucky. It's no point going back anymore. So, lot of things going on in my mind. But at the end of the day, I told myself that this was my dream, that this was my passion. And if I gave up on my dream, then regrets for the rest of the life are only going to be mine. And at the end of the day, it's my dream. If I will give up, who else is going to do that for me? No one else is going to do that for me. It doesn't make any sense to give up. So I said, I'll go and try climbing Everest one more time. And in the third attempt, even if I deboard the plane, and while deboarding the plane, if I twist my ankle and if my expedition is cancelled, I will call it off. I will not climb Everest again. But I want to ensure that I have given 500% of my effort to this project before giving up. So I decided that I will climb Everest for the third time. And I showed up at Everest Base Camp in 2016. Now, 45 days went through really fine. I reached the base camp. I had let my body adjust to various altitudes on the mountain, including even touching 25,000 feet. And now I was ready to reach the top of Everest. And we were stationed at this camp, which is about 26,000 feet. And it was May 18th night. And at 9:30, I think about 9:15, maybe not 9:30, around at the night, Mingma Tenzi Sherpa, my Sherpa, and I, both of us took off from the last camp, which is called South Col, and both of us started our climb towards the top of Mount Everest. We climbed for almost 12 hours through the night, and at about 9:15 the next morning, I was standing about 10 feet away from standing on the very top of Mount Everest. And a lot of people ask me what was going on in my mind when I saw the summit of Everest. I have to tell you, there were two emotions that were going on in my mind. The very first emotion was an emotion of intense relief that thank God this is done. 3 years and countless hours of so much effort to getting here, and finally I'm here, and I was feeling strong, so I knew that I would get back down safely without any problems. And the moment the emotion of relief went over, I think that emotion going down just brought a lot of tears, and the tears was just rolling down constantly. It was like, हिंदी कभी कभी हिंदी में वो लोग मस्ती में बोलते हैं कि एक बाल्टी दे दो और वो बाल्टी में आपके आंसू गिरते रहेंगे, और मतलब उस लेवल पे आई वाज लाइक क्राइंग, and I just couldn't hold back. I don't know what was happening. I had told myself n number of times leading up to Everest climb that I will not cry on top of Everest, because crying on top of Everest has a lot of problems. When you cry, you generate tears, and in that level of cold and wind, your tears can instantly freeze, rendering you temporarily blind on the mountain if your eyes stick to each other. I mean, if your eyelids stick to your eyes. So I'm like constantly telling myself I don't want to cry, but that's all I ended up doing on the top. And finally I reached the top, and my Sherpa was like, please compose yourself, you have to remove your goggles, take this picture. So of course I took this picture, and I had achieved the biggest dream of my life. And I had took one flag on the top. I had took a vegan flag on the top. A lot of people criticize me for not taking an India flag, but those people don't realize that I'm already an Indian. I myself am the flag of India. Why do I need to constantly take the flag everywhere? Isn't it enough that I'm standing on the top myself and representing as a proud Indian on the top? I think that should be good enough. I don't need to carry India flag everywhere. But I had carried the vegan flag because this is something that I wanted to send a message to everyone that vegans can do it. I wanted to debunk a lot of myths around veganism. So I took a photo with a vegan flag. I came back home. Of course, I came back down completely fine without any problems. I lost no digits. I didn't even get a sunburn on the top. Most people have a terrible sunburn. I didn't even get a sunburn. Of course, I have some sunburn on my nose, but that's about it. I came down and I came home, and I remember the entire internet was first vegan on the top of the world, first vegan on the top of the world. Every talk I go to, everyone announces first vegan on top of the world, Kuntal Joyshar, Kuntal Joyshar. I'm like, okay. At the back of my mind, I knew that I was not the first vegan on the world, and the evidence for that is right in this picture, is the jacket that I'm wearing. This jacket is created from something we call down. Down are the feathers of a slaughtered duck, and as you can see here how down is created. Ducks are abused and slaughtered in really bad fashion. Their feathers are taken away, and then they are stuffed inside a jacket, and that jacket is something that helps us stay warm on top of Mount Everest in minus 50 degrees Celsius. For 3 years, I tried really very hard to build a jacket which was without animals or without the feathers, and I did not succeed. It got to a point where I decided to make this one-time decision of wearing a dead animal on my body and climbing Everest and proving everyone wrong that vegans can't do it. Unfortunately, I do think in the hindsight that I should have tried harder, and that 2016 summit of Everest was one of the biggest failures of my life. Even though it was one of the biggest dreams of my life that I achieved, it was one of the biggest failures of my life, because I compromised with my ethics and I wore a dead animal and I reached the top. I came home and वो Zamir constantly bite कर रहा था मुझे, constantly, every day, every time I stood on that stage. It was really bad for me. It got to a point where I had lost my sleep, and I had to do something about this. And so I tried harder, and I reached out to this company called Save the Duck. They make jackets which are for city use, but these are completely animal-free jackets, 100% animal-free jackets. As you can see, the name, it's Save the Duck, and the logo is of a duck that has just escaped a slaughterhouse. So you can see a couple of drops of sweat on its head, and it's whistling and it's going out. That's Save the Duck. I told them, can you build this jacket for me that can withstand the top of Mount Everest? And they're like, we can try. and we are very confident of our insulation. So about 8 months of research and development later, the very first synthetic suit of the entire world was ready. And who would I test this on? The insulation has never been tested in extreme conditions before. The max it was tested was like what, minus 10 degrees. Now I'm talking about 29,000 feet and minus 50 degrees Celsius. So I'm like, okay, I am going to test it on myself because that's the only option that is remaining. Yes, I'll be putting my life on the line. I'll be putting my toes and fingers on the line. But I made a mistake in 2016 and it is time to rectify that mistake. And I'm going to be smart about it. It's not like I had a death wish or something. A dead kuntal is of no use to the animals. As simple as that. So I did not have any death wish. So I was going to be smart about it. And I climbed a smaller mountain, which is called Mount Lhotse, which is the 4th highest mountain in the world. I reached the top of Mount Lhotse on May 2018 on 15th May. And I reached on top, didn't even sneeze, didn't even have a cough, didn't even feel cold. Wearing this amazing Save the Duck suit in cozy, warm fashion. And when I was able to pull this feat off, I knew at the back of my mind that it was now time to go back to Everest and climb Everest. And I decided that I will climb Everest again, but this time I'll climb it from the northern side. Now Everest has 2 sides. One is the southern side, which is the Nepalese side, and northern side, which is the Tibetan side. The Tibetan side is known to be windier, colder, and harsher. And my point was, if I can prove that this jacket works in windier, colder, and harsher environments, then I will prove without doubt that vegan gear and vegan food both works. A lot of people question this logic, but let me give you a bit of background. First of all, I'm not an athlete. So I'm a Gujarati 110 kg software engineer who turned around and built a top of the world mind and body on a vegan diet. Then I wore this suit, which means that I'm a guy who's living in plus 40 degrees Celsius for throughout the year. So it's not like I have any kind of cold training also. I don't have any cold training. So guy who has zero genetic gift, who has zero background in athletics, who has zero background in mountaineering, goes through a journey, eats vegan food, wears a vegan jacket, and climbs to the top of the world, one of the toughest physical endurance feats, in some of the harshest conditions. I'm pretty sure the gear works and the food works, without a doubt. That's what my logic was when I went on this endeavor. And I still remember it was May 22nd, 2019. Again, we were at the last campsite. And again, it was my trusted guide, Mingma Tenji, with me. And both of us started this time at 9:30. The Chinese side is a little shorter on the last day because the mountain is completely different on both sides. Even though it's shorter, the terrain is really hard. And there are at least about 12 dead bodies on the mountain that are right in the way. And you are going to hit one very soon. And even though mentally I was prepared for seeing a dead body, the first time I saw a dead body completely disfigured with the head turned around, with the hands turned around, with complete body like disfigured, it was a bit of a shock. And also a stark reminder at that point that if I made any mistake, I was going to be exactly at that point and I would become a statistic in some newspaper for the coming years to come. And knowing that I am a vegan, this would become a far bigger statistic. It would become the headline of bloody every newspaper on this planet with saying vegan dies on the mountain trying to do stupid things. That would definitely have been the headline, and I was very cognizant of that fact. And so anyway, I keep climbing through the night. Both Mingma and I were very, very focused. And about 5:30 the next morning, both of us stood on the top of the Mount Everest. And this is truly, in my opinion, when I achieved the dream of my life. Climbing Everest in a 100% vegan fashion. And this time I actually had the official vegan flag with me, which I proudly flew on the top, knowing that no animal had to suffer or die for my dream to come true. So this was truly the moment of my life. And again, a lot of people ask me, was there any difference between first Everest summit and second Everest summit in terms of how you felt? Believe me, when I reached the top of Everest the second time, the very first thought in my mind was, let's get the heck out of here. I I don't want to spend any time on this top. It's cold and I'm feeling super cold and I'm exhausted right now because I was climbing really fast. And one of the biggest things that had happened in the last season was a lot of people who died because of traffic jams and other issues. And so that was playing on my mind. And I'm like, we need to be very, very safe and we need to be very, very specific and very, very focused. We have gotten to the top. I have a lot of energy left. Let's not waste time. Be clinical. Let's get back down. Once I'm at the base camp, I can enjoy as much as I want. Right now is not the time to enjoy. I have finished the dream. That's it. So a little less emotion, of course, on the top of Mount Everest. Far lesser emotion than 2016. But the important thing was to get to the top in a vegan fashion. So this is a little bit about my journey. And these 10 years, I have spoken about my journey a lot and I have written about my journey a lot. But till date on Instagram, on Facebook, I keep getting this constant question that where do I get my protein from? And this is a question that I'm really peeved sometimes to answer all the time. And I just want to briefly talk about protein a bit. I'm not going to go into a lot of technical details, but protein is essentially a combination of 20 amino acids, a group of 20 amino acids. Your body has ability to make 11 of them. These are, of course, the non-essential amino acids. And then there are 9 that your body can't make it on its own. These are essential amino acids, and they, of course, have to be obtained from your diet. These could be your diet, this could be supplementation or whatever. And another thing that I constantly keep hearing is that plant proteins are incomplete. First of all, this concept of complete and incomplete protein is not a very scientific concept. Every plant in the entire world has all the amino acids. They may not be in appropriate amounts, but every single plant on this world has all the 20 of them. So it's not like एक में एक में ये है ही नहीं, सब में थोड़ा 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 है. For example, soy may consist of something more than maybe a broccoli. So the idea is that if you are eating a very well balanced source of proteins throughout the day, like for example, if you are eating oats for your breakfast, you are eating dal for your lunch, you are eating maybe peanut butter for your snack, and then you are eating maybe tofu for your dinner, then a lot of amino acids from all of this will get pooled into your blood, and eventually you will get a full amino acid profile. And so you never have to think that मुझे अंडा खाना जरूरी है, मुझे दूध खाना जरूरी है, because the amino acid profile of whey or of eggs is a complete amino acid profile. That's not how it works. You can easily get a complete amino acid profile from plant-based foods. The key to all of this is a very, very balanced vegan diet. So if you are someone who's just going to eat pav vada and pav bhaji all day and then expect that you are going to be healthy, that's even not going to happen on a non-vegetarian diet. If you are just someone who's going to eat a chicken burger all day long, of course you are never going to be healthy. So it has to be a very well-balanced vegan diet, which is comprised of whole foods. Maybe if you want to add some processed food to make your life a bit convenient, that's okay. But majority of your calories, try and get it from whole foods. So you are eating more vegetables, you are eating more fruits, you are eating more whole grains, you are eating lentils, you are eating legumes, less of all the processed stuff, less of all the packaged stuff. So good vegan, well-balanced diet will give you all the nutrients. Another question that I constantly get is how much protein is enough? Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but for a regular person, which is most people on the planet, who are following a sedentary lifestyle or a moderately active lifestyle, you really don't need to get more than 0.8 grams per your kg of your body weight. Now, if you are someone who's an endurance athlete, someone who's like me, you want to get something like 1.4 to 1.6 grams per kilo of your body weight. Maybe if you are maybe on a plant-based protein, plant-based or a vegan diet, maybe slightly even more. Maybe you could go to 1.7 or 1.8 grams. So that's something that you need. And if you are a bodybuilding athlete, you need about close to 2 grams of protein per kilo of your body weight, even more, depending on what your eventual goals are, like how much you want to bulk up, what kind of things you want to do. To give you an example, I am currently 82 kgs and I eat about 130 to 135 grams of protein per day. Again, a lot of this is just guidelines. You have to figure out what works for you over a period of time. And it's not like I'm protein crazy that मैं पागल की तरह, you know, पूरे दिन में ये देखते रहता हूँ and I'm like really like crazy about it. As long as you know you plan your diet well, you won't have to be like so detailed. So to just give you a sense, a typical breakfast for me could be oats plus soy milk plus maybe a scoop of nice plant-based protein powder, which is from brown rice or pea protein, plus some fruits and greens. If you just mix and match and nice a couple of really big bowls of smoothie, it's about 40 grams of protein right there. Lunch for me typically tends to be a fair bit of vegetables combined with a source of protein. Again, it could be tofu, it could be seitan, it could be lentils, it could be beans. So lentils of any kinds, beans meaning mung beans, rajma, whatever. Again, if you just mix and match, combine, 40 grams of protein right there. To give you an example, about 250 grams of broccoli. I know that 250 grams of broccoli is a lot, but it's not really a lot to eat in a single sitting because it's really lighter on your stomach and it's hardly any calories. But 250 grams of broccoli has about 5 grams of protein. So if you just combine that with maybe a fair bit of tofu and some other vegetables, you really have a nice, well-balanced meal. Maybe you can add in some fat, like in form of maybe sesame seeds or something, to even get your healthy fats. Post-workout snack typically for me tends to be maybe a portion size of fruit and peanut butter. So if you see, I will end up eating a lot of fruit in a day because fruit is great carbs and those carbs are really important for any endurance athlete. And then dinner tends to be again fair bit of carbs again. So you'll see spaghetti, pasta, pizza, falafel, those kind of things. But I will also ensure that it's a well-balanced meal. So it's not just primarily carbs, but some form of protein and some form of healthy fats into it as well. So protein maybe in terms of some tofu or some seitan, and fats again in terms of mostly eating seeds and peanuts mostly. That's where I'm getting my healthy fats from. So I do use some oil, maybe some coconut oil for frying once in a while or some olive oil for frying once in a while. But otherwise I'm trying to move away from oil as much as possible and instead include whole fats in my diet because I truly believe that's a smarter way to go forward. And so if you see at the end of the day, I have hit my protein goal of 130 grams. But at the same time, if you look at even carbs and if you look at my fats, I have hit both those goals. And even in terms of micronutrients, by eating vegetables and fruits, I'm getting all the vitamins and minerals as well. So I am taking, like by eating a well-balanced diet, I'm getting at least 90% of my nutrition from my diet. Before I go forward, I do want to talk a little bit about protein from animals. Now, there are thousands and thousands, maybe tens of thousands of athletes today across the world who have achieved peak performance on an animal protein diet. So I mean, it is there. I can't deny that fact. But one of the biggest problems about animal protein is that, first of all, it is inhumane and unethical. I simply don't think that animals are here on this planet for us to use and abuse. They are here sharing the planet with us. They have equal right to live and love and exist. So we simply cannot grow and kill animals and treat them as shelf objects. They are sentient beings that deserve respect and that deserve compassion. It's also a very inefficient way of producing calories and protein, in my opinion. Imagine growing a cow for all these years, feeding her all this amount of whole grains and food grains and plants, taking away its milk, and it's using all this land, it's generating all these greenhouse gas emissions, and then eventually you're going to slaughter it for hardly any protein. So it simply doesn't make any sense to grow animals and then slaughter them for their protein. Eventually, animals are eating plants, and that's how they are building their muscle. So it doesn't make any sense. Why not directly eat the plants? Or why not directly extract the right proteins from the plant so that we can eat those proteins? As I again said, animal agriculture is responsible for a lot of greenhouse emissions and leading causes of deforestation, biodiversity, water pollution. Doesn't make any sense to eat protein from animals. And everyone knows animals, meat is full of cholesterol, dairy is full of cholesterol, full of unhealthy saturated fats, full of antibiotics, which is leading cause of bug resistance today on the planet, and totally low in fiber. Fiber is really important to keep your gastro system working in an optimal fashion. So many of these reasons why people should be moving away from animal proteins and instead should be shifting to plant proteins. Just one final thing before I get into question and answers is, as a vegan, what do I really need to take care of? I would not even say this is just for vegans. I think it's also true for vegetarians and true for non-vegetarians. Vitamin B12 and vitamin D3. What I tell for aspiring athletes and even regular people who are leading sedentary lifestyle, please get your blood work done so that you get a sense of where your vitamin B12 and where your vitamin D3 levels are. And if they are not appropriate, or if they are not at optimum levels, please ensure that you are supplementing so that your levels are at a very good level. Vitamin B12, unfortunately, you have to supplement. It's not really easy to get from plant-based foods. Frankly speaking, it's not even very easy to get from animal foods. Even if, like, people will say that eat chicken liver or eat beef liver or things like that and you get your vitamin B12. I mean, the amount of vitamin B12 in beef liver is so less that you would have to eat like pounds and pounds of it to even get minimum quantity. So it does not make any sense to get your B12 from your food. It's just smarter to get it from a supplement. Today, there are so many vegan supplements available in the market. Actually, most regular B12 supplements in the market are also vegan because B12 is just bacteria and it can easily be synthesized in the lab. So you can just get a typical supplement, ensure that your levels are good. D3, on the other hand, can also be gotten from sunlight. Recent research that has been done in the last few years, it calls for you to be exposing at least 30 to 40% of your body for about 40 to 45 minutes in sun from 11 to 1 in the afternoon, not in the morning. So if you are someone who can actually pull that off, you can get some amount of your D3 from sun, and then balance amount maybe you can just get it from a supplement. Again, there are a lot of vegan vitamin D3 supplements. The idea is that both deficiencies of both of these things can cause problems. So just be smart about it, and if your levels are not there, supplement. So yeah, I will sort of part off with one this thought, which is something that I even shared earlier on in the journey, earlier on in the talk. If a 110 kilo Gujarati software engineer, an unhealthy Gujarati software engineer, can turn around his life, go on this journey of building a top of the world mind and body on a vegan lifestyle, and climb to the top of Mount Everest not just once or twice, every single one of you listening into this recording should know that you will be able to achieve the biggest dreams of your life without eating or wearing any animals. So that's what my parting sort of message is for everyone.
Thank you, Kuntal. I think that's brilliant. Amazing presentation, very, very heart-touching and very overwhelming. You've done a really, really great job by actually providing this information. This is not just going to be talks. This is not just a conversation or a talk. It's really an education for people who are in the myth of, we need all of these to be an athlete or a runner or a mountaineer, any of these, So, and it took 60 days for you to complete to reach Mount Everest, and that looked so beautiful. The golden part and the lit part, so beautiful. I hope I can see it. I don't know whether I can climb, but I hope I can at least see it. Yeah. And then I really was thinking, when you were talking about the flag in the whole presentation, that the vegan flag, yes, I hope we have an Indian flag with a vegan logo in it.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. I think I can take that flag next time, so that no one can say कि India का flag नहीं लेके गया. दोनों flag लेके गया मैं.
That India turns vegan and we have a flag with a vegan logo in it. I really dreamed that when you were saying that. Such a yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing. Whatever you've shared.
So this was around the same time in 2016 when I summited Everest. Is around the same time my wife went vegan. She did not go vegan initially. It was mostly plant-based. Because there's slight distinction between plant-based and vegan. She had a problem with her acne, and she tried some of the worst antibiotics in the world that can directly impact the child in your womb. It can literally have bad impact on the child in your womb. She tried all of those things. Nothing worked for her. Her acne would go away when she was on the medicine, and then the moment she stopped the medicine, it would come back. She tried everything, and then once I just masti mein I told her, you have tried everything. Veganism bhi try kar lo, free ka advice hai. मैं तो ऐसे भी खा रहा हूँ इतने सालों से vegan. मेरे diet पे join कर लो. Nothing like you're not going to miss out on anything. थोड़ा ghee butter निकल जाएगा. Paneer anyways we don't eat, and ice cream nahi khane milega, but we anyways have all the alternatives. We have vegan cheese, we have vegan ice cream, heck, we have vegan gulab jamun too. So if you want whatever, we can get alternatives, so you will not be missing out on anything. So she said, okay, I'll try for 6 months. So she went vegan. She tried for 6 months eating a plant-based diet, and her acne just disappeared without using any medicines or without using any antibiotics. And that's when she said, okay, I'm going to stick to a plant-based diet. And as she went further in her plant-based diet journey, it also translated to things like, hey, I'm not going to wear a silk sari, I'm just going to wear a synthetic sari, or I'm not going to buy a leather purse anymore, I'm going to buy a synthetic purse. So looking out for looking out for cruelty-free options like lipstick, buying it from vegan-friendly brands, or just those kind of things. So I see a lot of activism, vegan activism today, trying to look down upon plant-based diets or people who first adopt plant-based diets. Look, guys, you are not doing any good to the movement. My wife is a prime example. She first adopted a plant-based diet and then converted to being a vegan. She didn't go vegan first. A lot of people will go vegan or a lot of people will do these things for different reasons. And if you're constantly going to want to chase perfection, that everyone has to be the perfect vegan in the world, that everyone has to be vegan to begin with and not plant-based to begin with, I think you are setting the movement up for failure, is how I see it. So, and again, as I said, my wife is a big example of that, to a point that she even went through a vegan pregnancy. Imagine the amount of pressure that is there in my community, where my mother, where all my relatives, we literally were getting phone calls from relatives that we had not heard from in long time saying, are you sure you want to do a vegan plant-based diet pregnancy? Are you sure there will be some problem with your baby? There will be some problem with the pregnancy? And I'm like, guys, what you're getting from non-vegan food is carbs, proteins, and fats. And as long as my wife is getting carbs, proteins, and fats from the vegan diet, which is pretty similar to what she would have gotten from a non-vegan diet, and if we are supplementing correctly, and it's not very difficult to get vegan supplements, so decent, well-balanced plant-based diet combined with proper supplementation, I somehow don't see why there should be a problem. Like your body, like your stomach is not saying, अरे हाँ मुझे animal protein मिला, यही मैं digest करने वाला हूँ. अभी मुझे ना pea का protein आ रहा है, brown rice का protein आ रहा है, इसको मैं सीधा फेंक दूंगा side में. That's not how your body works. Your body is just looking at it as amino acids, and then your genetics decide how it's going to use amino acids. It's simple science. There's no rocket science here. So when people are saying things like अगर वो घी नहीं खाएगी तो बच्चे को प्रॉब्लम होगा, ऐसा नहीं होता है. There is also vegan ghee in the market available today, which has a pretty similar profile to your non-vegan ghee. So my wife ate vegan ghee, she ate vegan ice cream, she ate vegan cheese. She did not miss out anything during her pregnancy. Our baby was born super healthy. The baby is super healthy today also. She's far healthier. Like she's on the higher side of her height, on higher side of her weight and everything. She's doing great. And I don't want to boast about it or anything. But look, as long as you are being smart about it and you are eating a decently good vegan diet, a well-balanced vegan diet, I simply don't see why there should be a problem. And I can understand that a lot of people may say, "अरे vegan ghee or vegan cheese और ये सब तो सब लोग नहीं afford कर सकते." तो don't need to eat vegan ghee, don't need to eat vegan cheese, don't need to eat vegan ice cream. You can instead replace it with simpler versions of fat, which are, you can eat coconut का जो fat मिलता है, peanut से जो fat मिलता है. At the end of the day, those are all healthy fats. And they're pretty similar to ghee in their profile. So ऐसा कुछ नहीं है that you want to miss out on anything in a vegan diet if you're just planning it well. If you're just someone who's going to eat dal rice throughout the day, and then that's your diet for throughout the year, then it's not healthy anyway. So it has to be a very well balanced diet, and that's what my wife followed. And look, and it has been a proper journey for us. There have been no issues. Today she's on breastfeeding, and we have just accordingly planned her diet so that there's no issues with that as well. So just a little bit preparation and just a little bit planning, because of course in the vegan world there are lesser resources in terms of vegan pregnancies and everything, but now with so much exposure and so many mothers adopting or deciding to go the vegan pregnancy route, I'm pretty sure in next 5-10 years this would just be a norm, and people would not be making you phone calls and saying "अरे मत करो, कुछ हो जाएगा." Those all things will just disappear. And I'm scheduled to climb a mountain in May of 2021. That is the tallest peak in the North American continent. It's called Denali. It's in Alaska. And that's something that I'm training for right now. And that's also part of a journey which I call the 7 Summits, or which is called the 7 Summits. This is climbing the 7 tallest mountains in the 7 continents of the world. So I've already finished Asia, I've already finished Africa, and I have already finished South America. So these 3 countries I've finished. I've already finished Europe, but I finished Europe and I was wearing a down jacket. So I'm going to go and do it again without wearing a down jacket. So I have still 4 continents remaining, which is Europe, North America, Oceania, which is Australia and some islands near Asia, and finally is Antarctica. So those 4 continents are remaining. Next up is, as I said, North America. That's in May 2021, and then I'll see how things go. For now, I'm in wait and watch mode, training and getting ready and being in the best shape of my life whenever the mountains open up.
You know what I feel like telling you is that I really salute you for going back, because you were wearing that jacket and you want to go back to that mountain. I really...
I have to go back. This is a 7 Summits project in a 100% vegan fashion. So it has to be done in a 100% vegan fashion.
All the best from our heart, really. And I look forward with your family, because it's amazing, because family matters. Yes. It's not just a person, but as families do it, it's just for the next coming generations, we don't have to worry, because they will follow it. We are not making a trend for ourselves, we're making a trend for the coming generations. And You're doing a brilliant job. I want to really thank you from my heart. And we look forward to see you in Bangalore and host you in Bangalore at Just Speak.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Awesome. Look forward.